We've got Ryan Godbey, Casey Atwater, and Trey Cox. Come on up, guys. So before we get started, a little bit of the framing. We're talking about the CFO-Audit handshake. And when Dante and EY talk about the power of the audit and that trust and confidence, that's on the external side. Underlying that trust and confidence is methodology and technology. Sometimes it's people and paper, but more and more in the future, that methodology is going to be in technology. We see it with external auditors, we see it at Trillian. Now, that technology is getting really powerful. It's able to go from sampling to continuous and full population coverages. And I think we underappreciate the superpowers of an auditor and a lot of the methodologies that have been accumulated in knowledge over the years. Now, a lot of that's moving to technology, and the question becomes, could those superpowers be brought in closer to the CFO, some of those audit superpowers within the Chief Financial Officer's office? So we find that internal audit has a really good opportunity to be one of the champions of AI and the CFO-Audit handshake, using some of those technology advancements internally. And I'm really excited to be with the three of you today. Now, to get started, I just want to go maybe, are we left to right, right to left? Okay. First of all, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Accounting 30 will look like to you from an internal audit perspective.
Yeah, all right, I'll go first. Ryan Godbey. I currently provide advice to management and internal audit on SOX 404 and internal controls. This is relatively new for me in the last year. For the bulk of my career, I was at a Big Four accounting firm as an external audit partner. And I saw an opportunity to serve the space on SOX, so that's what I'm doing currently. In terms of what things look like going forward, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record here, but it was mentioned in the earlier panel, the continuous monitoring, and I think that's going to be the biggest difference, and I want to get into that in the discussion today.
Amazing, Ryan. Excited to have you. And Casey, ZoomInfo just IPO'd recently. You're head of internal audit at a top SaaS company in the world. Tell us about yourself and your view for Accounting 2030.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. I want to first appreciate you inviting me out to this panel. I'm very excited. So what I would say is my career's spanned 17 plus years, external audit, financial reporting, and then co-source helping companies go public. And most recently, ZoomInfo went public in April 2020, or June of 2020, got hired in April 2020. And really what my department with internal audit is really, I'm trying to enable the business to be more streamlined with processes, good data governance, being able to ultimately serve up the information to external auditors so that they can be well informed and ultimately not have any deficiencies from a public company perspective. I mean, that's probably the main important thing is no one really wants to have deficiencies. And so if you can able to serve that data up appropriately with routines as efficient as possible, that is the ultimate goal.
Amazing. Welcome, Casey and Trey Cox.
Thank you, Isaac. So Isaac and I go back to grad school days. Went to UT Austin first, but didn't meet him until MBA program at UT Dallas. And I worked in internal audit at Truist, a regional bank in the Southeast for 7 years, 2 years at SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. You guys may have heard of them. March 10th of 2023, I realized I probably was not going to be working there anymore. Then within a month, I started working in regulatory reporting at a large bank you guys are probably also familiar with. And I'd say as far as what I see for Accounting 2030, without a question, more efficiency. That's kind of been the law of business. I forget what Moore's Law or Ohm's Law, something like that, and computer science kind of follows the same path. But will we be more effective? I think that's up to all of us in the room. And I know we can do it, so let's go out and make it happen.
Okay, amazing. So thanks, Trey. Let's start with a question. This is a big one for us at Trulian. We still see a lot of sampling used, and the idea with both external and now internal audit is with technology, with AI, to be able to move from sampling to full population, right? How do you see that evolving, starting with Trey, in the future? And maybe what superpowers could we unlock of using AI technology to evolve beyond sampling?
Sure. Well, I'd say the first thing is methodology has to allow for you to do this, which may sound basic, but from my experience, that's been a critical thing where we saw challenges without that in place. And I think we're going to get into more specifics later on, but that's where I go with that.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's interesting because, Artie talked about kind of the consumers. We'll talk about Silicon Valley Bank. I was, we're an SVB customer at Trulian, and I think it was the Series B round closed right before the bank collapsed, right? Or didn't close. It was in transit when a bank collapsed. That is a traumatic experience for a company, right? I'm not saying that's a regular thing, but that was traumatic, and that's what we're all trying to avoid against, those peaks of risk. And I thought it was interesting, going back with Trey, how Trey, and there's a lot of internal auditors out there who are trying to push to go beyond sampling and new methodologies, but a lot of times it sounds like the rubber hits the road in terms of what you can do. Now, I'm not saying that would have stopped the SVB collapse, but I think what you'll see in the CFO-Audit handshake is, at the core layer, if we're not inhibited by the legacy sampling requirements and the legacy methodology requirements, if that can become more automated from a technology perspective, whether it's external or internal audit, you can move up the value chain and hopefully spend more time doing risk assessment around what it means for a bank to have all venture capital backed SaaS companies, right? They're not directly correlated, but we see it from a kind of a labor equation and talent equation correlated. So let's get this basic sampling and methodology down. We could do a lot more moving up the risk curve. Is that fair to say, Trey?
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. Casey, sampling and methodology. You're in a tech company, right? So you're inherently more tech forward, is that fair to say, in terms of what you can do?
That's fair to say. So when you think about sampling methodology, I'll go to continuous control monitoring. It's, like I was saying, going back to making sure that you have faith in the financial statements. If you can audit those continuously, that's going to be better. Management will be more equipped to handle deficiencies in a timely manner. And in order to rely on continuous control monitoring, you have to kind of go back to systems, because the system is ultimately monitoring the activity. And so really, auditors of the future are going to have a big system understanding. And traditionally, with systems, they primarily have been within the IT org. From a change management and security perspective, IT manages that. But with AI, that is going to be cascaded across multiple lines of business. And so really being able to be upfront with the business internal audit when these projects are occurring to ensure that they have proper change management procedures and proper security procedures is going to be of utmost importance. And then layer that back on when continuous control monitoring, these AI systems are going to be ultimately spitting out exceptions, right? And so being able to have processes to streamline the exception management and clearing those exceptions and having a full audit trail from input into the systems, ultimately into the financial statements, is going to be of utmost importance. And then layering in external audit.
Interesting. And just out of curiosity, you at a tech company, now public tech company, do you feel like your organization is maybe more tech forward or more perhaps receptive to internal audit coming in and saying, hey, we could use some shiny new tools to deliver more value to the organization?
I would definitely say that we're more receptive to utilizing shiny new tools. Specifically, one area, kind of going back to IT focus, to reduce the risk of an overall audit is to really focus on the IT controls, because if you have failures in IT controls, your business process controls are going to fail. So we have implemented continuous control monitoring activities primarily around IT security controls, as well as a little bit on change management side. But that gives management assurance that they can rely on the processes that are within the systems.
Awesome. And again, Ryan, moving from sampling to methodology, you've been on the other side of this equation. And so sometimes we're looking at, if you're Trey, you're saying to your auditor, hey, I think I can do more if I expand the population of what I'm doing. I think I can get into some more interesting anomaly detection and risk detection. But on the other side, there may just be natural barriers to going beyond the sampling and the methodology that's in place. Have you seen that? Have you felt that in your career?
So I'm going to wander a little bit here. I've got some things to say. So having been in external audit pretty much my entire career, Big Four firm, I'm used to methodology. And so the Big Four firms that are out there, I'll make an assumption, their methodology to do an audit is 10,000 pages long, okay? Now, let's go and see what internal audit has for their methodology. And spoiler alert here, it's not very good, okay? You've got some information, guidelines, guidance that's out there from the Institute of Internal Auditors. It's not very deep. So a lot of people don't have a methodology. Maybe at a company the size of Trey's, they've created their own methodology, but for most companies, it doesn't even exist. And the whole representative sampling concept, companies can't wait for people to tell them what to do from a methodology perspective. So representative sampling, buzzword we've heard a couple times here so far, came about in the 1980s, okay? It stood there in the 80s, it stood there in the 90s, it stood there in the 2000s. Around 2015, regulators started to become aware of auditing through technology. They put out working groups, some papers, and all this sort of stuff. But from what I see, the first meaningful piece of guidance on auditing through technology, it actually doesn't even go into effect until 2026.
Wow. Who's that from? IAA?
That's from on the external audit side.
Okay, got it.
So, so IIA is going to be even further behind that. So I would definitely recommend to folks from a methodology perspective, you may have to create it. You may have to talk to others and see what they're doing from a methodology perspective.
So that brings, dare I say, a little bit of creativity into the equation. So the internal audit can create a methodology internally, right? Now, I guess one question I'll have for Casey, right? If you create this methodology or framework, is it just about kind of checking the box or checklists on that methodology that you set out, or maybe it's an external methodology? Or do you feel like if internal audit has those AI superpowers, they can provide real kind of cost recommendations or potentially top-line recommendations to the CFO and to the business? Is there more than just checklist methodology when you get into this?
Yeah, I would say internal audit, sure, the checklist methodology I think what I really focus on is adding value to the business. How can we, from a cost perspective, reduce cost, have more streamlined processes, have more accurate financial statements? And so really, you're going to utilize data, blend data with guidance. And if you can do that in an automated fashion, directly where auditors or where accountants are doing their work, when they're evaluating exceptions, that is going to be, number one, great from a training perspective. Number two, great from an efficiency perspective. Number three, great from a cost reducing perspective, but also enabling accountants to then focus on strategic objectives rather than the mundane work of putting up Excel files, comparing reports from one system to reports to another. And I think really, ultimately, the goal is to utilize these systems in a human-in-the-loop workflow methodology.
Very nice. And what do you guys think, maybe I'll start with Trey. When we think about the actual AI use cases that can be deployed internally, real things that could drive not just the checklist, but really drive cost, efficiency, risk, revenue in certain areas. Now that we have these toolkits, Trey, do you have a sense of, in the next 5 years, some of those areas that internal audit could bring to the table?
Absolutely. So audits are broken up into 4 parts. You've got planning, risk assessment, field work, and reporting, and then you could also throw in the 5th of issue validation and follow-up, which that one's going to be more related to the 3rd and 4th section. As far as planning, just looking at what I think it can be a good use case to just come up with what your audit plan is going to be, your annual continuous rolling plan. It can also, I think, spot deficiencies in where, I don't want to say deficiencies like in the business, but just deficiencies in how auditors have maybe filled out their timesheets or not filled out their timesheets. I always filled out my timesheets on time every week. But yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge. You've got these deliverables that when you're on an audit that you need to meet, but then we also need to fill out proper time tracking. And maybe it's something like a plug-in to whatever work paper system you got that actually sees how much time you're spending in each of these areas. I don't know, but that's an idea. Risk assessment, this is one of my top 2 areas. I think risk assessment to me is my favorite part of an audit. I don't know if anyone's ever said that, but it's my favorite part because your audit is not going to be successful if you don't have proper risk assessment to know what you should be testing. First of all, you're going to get, it's the old garbage in, garbage out model. You're going to be potentially testing the wrong things, and you're also going to lose trust with your audit clients because they're going to think these auditors are here. They're going to give me an issue they don't even understand my business. I've heard that now from the business side that's always a concern. That my colleagues on my team has is that we want to make sure that there's an understanding of what it is that we're truly doing. And then, also with proper risk assessment, you can get a proper fieldwork plan. That was always something that I would look to do, is make sure that we've got the right attributes actually being tested. Then you go into fieldwork. I think there was quite a bit that Dante and Artie talked about here, just with doing the software will do the taking and tying for you, about 90% accuracy. You can come back and you can check do your checking, do your review. I think this is one of the most exciting parts from the talent perspective. You showed that graph about how the accounting pipeline is coming down. Dante said it's probably coming back up. I think the first 3 or 4 years of my career, I'm sitting there kind of beating my head against the wall, doing a lot of taking and tying of more mundane practices, when I just spent all this time and money studying in school and for the CPA exam, really in-depth accounting guidance, and here I am just making sure that the loan system agrees to documentation. Now, obviously that's important, but is that really the best use of my time? Now people are going to be enabled to do that, and I think also get better engagement too. And then finally, report writing. A big use case of large language models is helping you draft paragraphs and sentences off of notes. That could help there a lot too. So.
Yeah, thanks, Trey. And just to give you guys a sense, when we talk about the CFO audit handshake and a little bit more about Trulian, we view it as a community, as the accounting community, and it's one thing to think about how to work with a global organization of 400,000 members. It's another thing to hear from people on the ground, really not just entry level, but guys like Trey, who've been coming up and 1 foot in some of the new technologies, 1 foot in some of the historic ways of doing internal audit. So I think putting all these equations together are great. We'll go to Ryan and then Casey, okay? Give us that whiz-bang 1 or 2 use cases where we can get some ROI from internal audit deploying AI technology in the next 5 years.
Yeah, in terms of specific cases, I guess what I would say is wherever you are, wherever your feet are currently, think about where the high volume of transactions are. Think about where lengthy documents or a high quantity of documents are involved. And think about where there's time compression. And I think those guidelines will steer you towards where you need to go, and it might differ company by company. I really liked what Artie said before about using AI in the diligence process, because we're talking about lengthy documents, we're talking about a compressed time period. So I think each company is a little bit different. I'm working with one right now that's struggling with their lease documents. They've got over 300 stores. They're a retailer, and all it takes is one little phrase in one of those documents, and you got yourself a potential accounting issue. And so, high volume of transactions, large quantity, lengthy documents is where my mind goes.
Fantastic. And then Casey.
Yeah, so I'll go with kind of piggyback off the documents perspective. One of the main purposes, one of the main important things from an audit perspective is testing inputs into the systems, right? And so that usually is a document and comparing that document to ultimately the system. And so historically, that's been done manual. With AI today, you can take that document, change it from unstructured data to turn it to structured data, and then run data analytics routines. And so that's really where you unlock the continuous control monitoring capabilities. And we've been piloting use cases like that at ZoomInfo. Another area that I'd like to say is on the risk assessment perspective. I think as we move into 2030, management and businesses are going to be bringing in more agentic solutions. Bringing in more agentic solutions is going to be hard to really stay on top of that from an internal audit perspective. So what you're going to really need to do is have systems to monitor the agents and be able to visibly see that when the agents are acting with those systems. And that's really where risk assessment is going to be coming in, is because those agents are typically going to be more risky, I would say, from a systems perspective. And I think ultimately, really being able to see processes from end to end, where humans are intervening versus where agents are. And so the only way to holistically see that is to have systems that reside on top of all your ERP systems or your agentic solutions, and kind of map that to risk and control points that then ultimately go out to the financial statements.
Fantastic. So you're saying there's going to be agents on top of the agents?
Yes, with humans in the loop.
Very nice. And does this present an opportunity? We've talked about this a lot at Truly, and we look at internal audit not as like SOX checklist or kind of historically what it's been. We look at internal audit similar to how we talked about the CFO or the external auditor as a group that has an entire purview of the business. So I guess my question, and maybe we'll go back to Casey, do you see internal audit getting a little bit more, let's say, juice or beef internally because of your ability to see the whole business? Do you see more investment into an internal audit team or processes, like, let's say, more on the financial side to uncover cost savings, leakage, things like that? Or are we just status quo? You're a public company, you need a couple internal auditors.
No, I think in today's day and age, you're going to fail if you're status quo. So I think when I look at from a budgetary perspective, I always think about people, process, and technology. And a lot of things are, number one, you need people that can enhance the technology, right? Understand the technology, audit the technology. So that's going to be important as graduates. You're going to look for competencies in computer engineering, data science, but as well as an accounting background. Then really the next process is, where can I implement technology to really streamline the process? So I think there are big bets in basically Trulian, buying something like a Trulian product, because that's going to be able to streamline the processes and have better accuracy. And I think it's important and it's imperative to always focus on the next best thing from a technology perspective, to at least understand it and to make rationalized decisions from a budgeting perspective. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. And I'll kind of wrap it up. I really appreciate these insights. I think it's a unique area that we're going to monitor over the horizon for the next few years, not just at public companies, but really the functionality of internal audit, not necessarily internal auditors, but some of the capabilities bringing into the middle market and even to other companies. Trey, you mentioned field work, right? And so we see field work as a great opportunity. Field work, a lot of the methodologies came out of external audit. And when you're doing things like field work, you're looking at an AP register against invoices, or you're looking at an AR or GL data against contracts. And in a sampling methodology, you may be taking 30 or 50 or 100 of those to match them. Well, that's great. If you find something wrong, you just take another sample and you correct. And but in reality, if you could take 5,000 of those records on each side, you could find cost, you could find revenue leakage. On the AP side, you could find payment mismatches. You could find maverick payments. You can have shadow payments. So all of these ideas, which really relate to bottom line and top line for a CFO, have been cultivated based on external audit methodologies over the years, but they've been built in a framework that was related to sampling and low volume methodology. So I think there's an interesting equation as we get these technology superpowers influenced by the external audit, especially with field work, right? And especially when it relates to financial and financial controls. If we could use some of these historic sampling methodologies to do full coverage, you know, as a CFO or an external advisor could find significant cost savings and potential revenue opportunities based on this framework, really improving the CFO audit handshake. So I thought that was a really interesting panel. I appreciate you guys coming out today. Ryan, Casey, Trey, thank you very much. And thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks, Isaac.
Thank you.
Thank you.